on your team, and as well as you can see this lecture on my YouTube channel. So this Facebook app is also I'm using for giving you the site where to watch this lecture again, and mostly my video channel or video recording is available on a team and as well as on YouTube where my channel is available. You can subscribe that one so that you may have to receive these lectures, and the email which is the journal email by which on which you can contact with me, and even you can email me on a official email site, and as well as you can message me on a WhatsApp if you needed any clarification which is not clarified after a presentation of this one. Even I will give you a 5 to 10 minutes you can ask from me about the lecture. So today we are going to discuss the stomach. As I have told you that stomach in the compound animals, there is in a compound stomach there is the four stomach or four parts of the stomach in which there is a rumen, a reticulum, omasum, and abomasum. So in this stomach, in a simple stomach, only abomasum is a one compartment which develops the complete stomach, which performs the digestion in the simple stomach animals. तो जो जानवर जिनमें सिंपल स्टमक होता है, सिर्फ एबोमेजम मौजूद होता है, वो हर्बीवोरस भी हो सकते हैं, ओमनीवोरस भी हो सकते हैं और कार्निवोरस भी हो सकते हैं. तो इसलिए इनके स्टमक में यह कैपेसिटी होती है टू डाइजेस्ट दी food like the carnivorous animals can digest the bones, the meat, or even the flesh, or the animals like omnivorous can digest the vegetables, fruits, and as well as they can digest the meat. So as you are knowing that the digestive system starts from esophagus, and esophagus is joining the stomach at a cardiac structure, and then there is a stomach having a body and a fundus, enterium, and sphincter, pylorus. Then the gallbladder is below the liver, and the liver, spleen, pancreas, duodenum, large intestine having a colon, rectum, anus, and a small intestine having a duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. So these are the compartments of the small intestine, whereas the large intestine having three compartments. As I have told you, that is a colon and rectum and the cecum. Cecum is the largest portion in a horses, whereas the cecum is a rudimentary in a small animals. So we have to discuss over here the stomach. Therefore, I have described here the digestive system from esophagus to anus, except the mouth is left over here. So you can see the stomach of the dog, and the stomach of dog is one of the model for the understanding the physiology of human being, because the digestion of the food which takes place in the especially in a dog is similarly as it has been taking place in the human. So we will discuss over here the digestive system of a dog, which has a simple stomach animal, and therefore the simple stomach animal's digestion. By understanding the dog stomach, we will be able to understand the digestion process of a human being as well. So the esophagus, mostly the dogs or even the rodents or even the guinea pig all these are being used as a model for studying the experiment which should be taken on a human beings. They are being conducted on a model animals so that the process can be understood and the different observations which needed to be taken place on the human. We have to save the animals instead of uh, instead of the sacrificing the model animals instead of a human being. So they are the lifesaver of a human being. We are not consuming or sacrificing the humans for different experiments, as in the early stages there is a lot of the mortalities when you are conducting any surgical or even a physiological experiment on the animals. Mostly it happens that the animal may have to die in the experiment. So if you are using a human being, it will be a more cruel. So therefore, the most of the experiment which should be conducted on the human beings, they are being conducted on the model animals. So therefore, I am over here describing the stomach of the dog. It is a similar structure is and that similar histological structure is present in the human being. So the stomach having is a sac-like portion of tract, digestive tract. Convoluted surface allows the expansion. Contains the third layer of a smooth muscles for a mixing of food with the gastric juices. So this is the muscular layer which is present in the tunica muscularis, which is present as a third layer in the animal's stomach. That is also connecting the common duct with the duodenum. So it gives the gastric juices as well as the juices which may have come down from the gallbladder, from the liver and pancreas. So they are also drained into the duodenum. Whereas the gastric juices are mostly produced, they are also utilized for the digestion which takes place in the stomach. So three kinds of the secretory cells are present in the stomach. There one is the parietal cells which secrete the hydrochloric acid and intrinsic factor for a vitamin B12 absorption. So the intrinsic factor is also produced by the parietal cells, which is helping in the digestion and absorption of the vitamin B complex. The chief cells which secretes the pepsinogen inactive from the inactive form of a pepsin. So these are the secretions which takes place in the animal stomach. Then if you see the stomach structure, that the esophagus is connected at the in the stomach, and there is the stomach body, fundus, antrium, and the duodenum is attached at the pyloric sphincter is present at the junction of a duodenum. Then the stomach is made up of a 4 layers. One is the uppermost layer, which is covering of the stomach is serosa. Then the second layer is a muscular longitudinal layer. Then the circular layer and oblique layer. Means there are the 3 layers of a muscles. One is the longitudinal layer, circular layer, and the oblique layer. Then the submucosa and the mucosa. So there are 4 layers: tunica serosa, tunica muscularis, tunica submucosa, tunica mucosa. So these are the tunica means the layers. Therefore, the stomach is made up of a 3 layer, 4 layers. One is the tunica serosa, tunica muscularis, tunica submucosa, tunica mucosa. So if you see that the inner layer, which is the mucosal layer, that has a gastric pit that has a mucous cells, that is a chief cells. There are parietal cells in the villi. So the mucosa having the structure which is connected with the nervous system, which is connected with the blood supply, and they have a secretory cells which produces the gastric juices. So the gastric pit is also producing the gastric juice. The mucous cells are producing the gastric juice. Chief cells are producing the gastric juice, or even the parietal cells are producing the gastric juice. Another very important structure which is present in the gastric pit, that is the gastric glands that are producing the gastric juice too. So there is then the submucosa and the muscular layer. As I have told you, there are three layers in the muscular. One is the oblique layer, then the circular layer, and longitudinal layer. All these are smooth muscles, and these are being distributed in a oblique nature, this is the circular nature, and then the longitudinal. So the last layer, which is the covering and outer layer covering, that's known as the serosa. So there is a four layers present in the stomach. One is the tunica serosa, tunica muscularis, tunica submucosa, and tunica mucosa. So there is a mouth, esophagus, stomach, duodenum, jejunum, ileum, large intestine as a cecum, colon, and anus. So or a rectum, and then the anus. So simple stomach digestive monogastric animal possesses these structures. One is the mouth, esophagus, stomach, duodenum, jejunum, ileum, then the large intestine having a cecum, colon, rectum, and anus. So the simplest form of the stomach is producing maintaining the pH in the stomach, helps the denature the food protein, and activates the pepsin and keeps it functioning. So the pH level of the stomach is maintaining and even performing the denature of the food, especially the protein, is also digested by the help of maintaining the pH, and this pH is activating the pepsin to be released, and therefore the pepsin is helping in the digestion. No significant digestion of a carbohydrate or a fat occurs in the stomach. So mostly the carbohydrate is digested in the mouth, having a amylase in the saliva, whereas the carbohydrate is also digested by in the duodenum, where the pancreatic juices and as well as the liver juices, or even the bile juices, or the enzymes are present over there. Though amylase is also present in the duodenum, which is helping in the carbohydrate, as well as the fats are also digested in the small intestine and absorbed in the small intestine. So absorption of some water, aspirin, and alcohol takes place in the stomach. So otherwise there is no absorption in the stomach. So mixture of the partially digested food, gastric juices, is called chyme. So chyme is developing in the digestive after digestion in the stomach, and that chyme is passed through from a stomach to the intestine. So the peptic ulcer commonly caused by a bacteria. Mostly it is being it is being heard that the human being having a peptic ulcer, or having a even in the dogs the peptic ulcer is present. So therefore it is due to the bacteria. So leaves the stomach through the pyloric sphincter to enter the small intestine. Mostly if you see that all the chyme is pushed into the duodenum from a sphincter that is known as a pyloric sphincter, where the duodenum is joined. So this pyloric sphincter allows the chyme to pass through, and then the chyme reaches into the duodenum. So if you see that the digestion takes place mostly in the in the humans after taking the bolus in the mouth, and it always been reaches into the stomach. So most of the mastication, regurgitation, the swallowing, or even a deglutition takes place in the mouth, and it passes through the esophagus into the stomach. So if you see the parts of the or the anatomy of the stomach, that is a lower esophageal sphincter. So this is the first sphincter which is in the start of the stomach, where the esophagus is joining. So the lower esophageal sphincter is present at the junction of a esophagus and the stomach. So the stomach, the largest portion is known as a fundus, that is the greater area, and that greater area is consist of a body. So this is known as the odd region, whereas the posterior region, which has a antrium and some portion of the body, and there is a sphincter which is the lower, which is the pyloric sphincter, which is present at the junction of a duodenum and a stomach. So this is the area which is known as a caudate region. So stomach has a lower sphincter, that is known as esophageal sphincter, fundus, then the odd region, and then the caudate region. So the odd region consists of a fundus and a body, where the caudate region is consist of a body and antrum, which has the pyloric sphincter, which connects the duodenum, which is present at the junction of a duodenum and the stomach. Now the fundus, body, pylorus, and sphincter. So if you see the histological components of GIT, then you have to see that there is a serosa, then there is the circular muscles having the muscular layer, then there is the longitudinal muscles, then there is a circular muscles, whereas there is a submucosa, third layer, that's submucosal glands, possessing a submucosal glands, and then the mucosa, which possessing a lumen, and as well as there is a mesenteric plexus, and then the major plexus. So the mesentery is also what it always means at the interior side of the area. So the histologically, from outside to inside, if you see, there is a serosa, which is outer covering of the gastrointestinal tract, and especially serosa is outlining of the whole the digestive system. So therefore, from the esophagus to the anus, the outer covering of the GIT is known as a serosa, whereas the second layer, which is consist of a three muscles, one is the longitudinal muscle, circular muscles, and the oblique muscle. So the muscular layer having a mesenteric plexus present in that one. So this is the second layer of the GIT, whereas the third layer of the GIT is submucosa, which contains a glandular, that's a mesenteric plexus, and that is the last layer, which is present, which is covering internal layer. It has a different shapes in the compound stomach animals, whereas in the simple stomach animal, the mucosa is made up of the lumen, and having a papillae over there, and villi are present all over the GIT. So the mucosa having a different shape all over the GIT system. So this is the layer is having a different structure. If you go through the from esophagus to anus, you can differentiate the inner layer of the submucosa in the different areas. So entering nervous system is present over there. Then the last main functions of the stomach we have to discuss over here. What are the main functions of the stomach in the simple stomach animal? One is the storage of the food, Second is the mechanical digestion, then the chemical and enzymatic digestion, and the digestive process is made up of four phases. One is the motility, filling, storage, mixing, and emptying. Whereas you are knowing that in the large animals, especially in the ruminants, the process of digestion is different. Whereas in the simple stomach animals, there are four phases which takes place for the digestion. One is the motility, the second is the secretion, which is the gastric juices are being secreted. Then the digestion. There is a digestion of a protein partially takes place in the stomach because of the presence of a hydrochloric acid. The absorption, that's a lipid soluble substance, alcohol and drugs are absorbed over here. And the gastric juices, there are gastric glands. There are three types of glands are present in the animals, especially in the simple and stomach animals. One is the cardiac gland, fundic gland, and pyloric gland. These are the three glands which are present as a gastric glands. And the cardiac gland is producing the mucus. The fundic gland is producing the hydrochloric acid. The pyloric gland is producing the mucus. So the fundic is also producing the pepsinogen, whereas the pyloric gland is also producing the gastrin. So the mucus along with the gastrin is produced by the pyloric gland, whereas the fundic is producing the hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen. So the gastric acid secretion is stimulated by acetylcholine parasympathetic system and the gastrin and histamine. And amino acid derivatives present in the most of the body tissues, they drives the secretion of the gastric glands. So this acetylcholine is responsible of stimulating the production of a mucous membrane, mucus, hydrochloric acid, pepsinogen, mucus, and gastrin from the gastric glands. So normal pH is also maintained by the production of hydrochloric acid and these enzymes. That's a 3.5 to a 5. This is the acidic. Therefore, the acidic nature of the gastric, the stomach, that is helping in the digestion of a protein. Therefore, the protein is digested in the stomach because the hydrochloric acid is also produced by the fundic gland, which increases. If the production increases, it will increase the pH, and therefore the pH, if it is a more acidic, then the more protein will be digested. Below the pH of a 2, the inhibition of a gastric secretion occurs. So if this pH is not maintained within the 3.5 to a 5, then if it goes below the 2, then definitely the gastric secretion will stop to be produced. So if you see that the gastric juices secretion, which takes place from the gastric pits and glands of the mucosa. So the gastric pits, mucosa, submucosa, and then the mucous cells, gastric glands, parietal cells, and chief cells are responsible for production of the gastric juices. So accentric mucosa lines body and the fundus. Mostly the gastric mucosa, that is lined by the different area, the fundus area, and the body is lined by the accentric mucosa. So the accentric mucosa is responsible for production of the gastric juices. Pyloric gland area, that is pyloric glands are present at the antrium. So therefore as the pyloric area produces the gastric pits, producing the gastrin and as well as the mucus, whereas the gastric pits are present at the pyloric area. Main component of the gastric juices are the mucus cells, mucus, and the bicarbonate, that is the function of the mucus and the bicarbonate is the protection, lubrication, and neutralization. So they are neutralizing the food, which might be alkalic, which might be acidic. So they are neutralizing by the presence of the bicarbonate, the lubrication that takes place by the mucous membrane, and the protection is also provided by the bicarbonate and the mucus. So the chief cells is producing the pepsinogen. When activated, the protein digestion begins. So definitely the pepsinogen is helping in the protein digestion, and the hydrochloric acid is also helping in the denature of the protein. So the parietal cells and the oxidative oxidative cells, they are producing the hydrochloric acid and intrinsic factor. So that activates the pepsinogen, a physical breakdown of food, and denature protein kills the microorganism. So the intrinsic factor helps in the vitamin B12 absorption. So these are the components, main components of the gastric juices, main products which are secreted from the secretory cells. One is the mucous cells, chief cells, parietal cells, and the oxytocin cells are producing the products like mucus, bicarbonate, pepsinogen, hydrochloric acid, and intrinsic factor. So nervous system controls the gastric secretions. So cephalic phase, the cephalic phase is one of the indicator or one of the important stimulator which causes the gastric secretion. So the cephalic phase is a testing phase, smelling phase, chewing or a swallowing stimulates the vagus nerve and stimulates the secretion. So the taste of the food, the smell of the food, the chewing of the food, swallowing of the food stimulates the vagus nerve, which stimulates the secretion of the gastric juices. So the gastric phase, that is also the stomach distension, activates the parasympathetic to stimulate the secretion. So the tympani, the blood, that distension always causes to activate and stimulate the gastric secretion, so that the digestion may take place quicker. So the intestinal phase, when the chyme passes from the stomach to the duodenum, then it inhibits the parasympathetic system to stop the secretion. So this chyme, when goes into the intestinal phase, starts, and that has to stop the secretion. So therefore there are three phases. One is the cephalic phase, which stimulates the secretion. The second is the gastric phase, which stimulates the secretion of the gastric juices, whereas the last phase, that is the intestinal phase, which inhibits the parasympathetic and stop the secretion. So that's why you have to see that the hormonal controls of the gastric. So we have discussed the control, nervous control. Now we are discussing the hormonal control of the gastric secretion. So gastrin secreted by local endocrine cells. So the local endocrine cells are present in the stomach, which are responsible for secretion of gastric. So these are mostly present in the enterium, and therefore they are producing the gastrin and mucus. Whereas that activated the gastric secretion, and this hormonal secretion also activate the gastric secretion too, and under the nervous system, nerve control the secretion of the intrinsic factor. The secretion of the intrinsic factor is secreted by the parietal cells. So parietal cells also is responsible for the absorption of the vitamin B complex, vitamin B12, and the important for the RBC formation, mostly in the presence of a vitamin B, the RBC has to be activated to be formed. So the deficiency of or a failure to utilize the intrinsic factor causes a pernicious anemia, means deficiency of the RBCs in the body. So therefore, it causes, if the intrinsic factor does not utilize or do not utilize or do not produce, absorb the B complex, B12, then mostly the RBCs are not being formed. And if the formation of the RBCs is stopped or being deficient to produce the RBCs, then the pernicious anemia will develop. So therefore, the mechanism of the hydrochloric secretion, how the hydrochloric secretion is produced, mostly the plasma, parietal cells, and the lumens are responsible of producing this hydrochloric acid. When the carbon dioxide enters, that reacts with the water and produces the carbonic, in the presence of a carbonic anhydrase, it produces the carbonic acid, and then the bicarbonate is developed. The bicarbonate is excreted from the parietal cell, whereas the hydrogen is developed, and that hydrogen has to be entered into the lumen, and the ATPs are produced, and that is also utilized by the parietal cells and ADPs. And whereas the sodium enters into the parietal cells, and the potassium also enters into the parietal cells, the sodium is converted into the ATPs, and that ATPs is converted into ADPs. So the potassium is go outside, and the chlorine is produced, enters into the parietal cells, and that the chlorine is come into the lumen. So the chlorine, the potassium, and the hydrogen, when enters into the lumen, that develops the hydrochloric acid. So the hydrochloric acid in the lumen causes the denature of the protein. So it helps in the digestion. So therefore, in that way, the hydrochloric acid is produced when the carbon dioxide enters into the parietal cells from a plasma. By then with the reaction of a water in the presence of a carbonic anhydrase, it produces the carbonic acid, and then the hydrogen is dissociated from this carbonic acid, and it goes into the lumen, whereas the bicarbonate is produced, which goes back to the plasma, and it helps in the buffering system, whereas the chlorine enters into the parietal cells, which go into the lumen, and the sodium is also absorbed and transported into the parietal cells, where the sodium is converted into the ATPs, and the potassium is also go into the parietal cells from a plasma, and that is also come down in the lumen. So this way the hydrochloric acid is provided into the lumen by giving a hydrogen from a bicarbonic acid, and the chlorine from the plasma, and when the chlorine and the hydrogen enters into the lumen, they form the hydrochloric acid. So this is the mechanism of a hydrochloric secretion. So the hydrochloric secretion is made by a parietal cells by absorbing the carbon dioxide from a plasma, and then the chlorine from a plasma. Then they are developing the hydrochloric acid, which is secreted into the lumen, which helps to denature the protein, and this way the protein is digested in the lumen. Lumen is the part of the stomach. So therefore, it is the last layer as well, which is known as a mucosa, and the mucosa is consists of the lumen and the papillae. So therefore, this is always mean the hydrochloric acid is being secreted by this mechanism. Thank you very much. This is again the last slide. So after recording all these the discussions, then we have to over here to say that this lecture will be available on this YouTube, and you can even watch again this if anybody is unable to see the slides or unable to receive my voice because of the internet problem. So that may I have to watch again on my YouTube on my team. So the revision or the refresh the lecture as well. Thank you very much for listening this